Oh, again, Zach. This is another one. This is called The Travels of a Grandfather. There's a man called John Steinbeck. He wrote a book called Travels with Charlie. This right here is of Travels with a Traveling Man. Now, behind me, over my shoulder, you're going to see the town of Nazareth. Where is Nazareth located? You should know that already. It's a town north of Jerusalem in Israel. So your father and I traveled to Israel, and we spent some time traveling around. And we came in Tel Aviv and then went north, and we were up in Nazareth and eventually went back to Jerusalem. And then your father decided he wanted to spend a semester at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. So he stayed, and I went back to Korea. So when your father was growing up, I wanted him to experience and see the United States. So we had basically three parts that we went. Number one, there was my family in Michigan. That was usually maybe about 2 weeks. About 10 days to 2 weeks there. And there was your mother's family in New York City. She has a nurse who immigrated in New York City and spent some time there. And then on the way back, flying out before we flew across the Pacific, I wanted Shawn to see the United States, and particularly the area west of the Mississippi. Now, when we were staying in New York, then her name was Jean. Your grandmother's cousin was named Jean, and she had immigrated as a nurse, and she had 2 children. And her son was in high school, and he was going to graduate soon from high school. And so he was a very good student, and so he wanted to see some campuses. So we went to a lot of the campuses in the East, like Harvard, Massachusetts Technology, Brown, Yale, University of Pennsylvania. I can't remember all of them, but we basically saw the ones. So he would decide where he wanted to go. He eventually picked MIT and graduated from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So that was the eastern part. Now the western part, Shawn, your father, and I would go into some city, and we would make a circle around it. And we go into it, and we're there. And so there was one thing that your father did not want to do. And I remember this because it was so funny. Your father didn't care where we went in the West as long as we did not go to one state. One state he did not want to go to. He did not want to visit one state. Can you guess what state that is that your father, and when he was a kid, in middle school and high school, did not want to visit in the United States? Think for a moment. Which state did he not want to see? Well, you may have guessed it. He did not want to see the state of Texas. So I managed to just keep out of Texas. So we went we were in most of the states west of the Mississippi. And we went to a lot of places. And there were 2 things we basically did for at night. We'd stay in a motel, or we'd do camping. I would often buy a tent and then sell the tent or give it away when we flew back out of Los Angeles or San Francisco. And I think one time we flew out of Portland. Yeah, we flew out of Portland, Oregon also. And so we would travel around. And the reason I did that is I wanted your father to experience and see the United States. So we started I remember when he was 5 years old. No, he was 4 and a half, and we went to Hawaii. When he was a year and a half, your grandmother and I took your father to Hawaii. He was a year and a half. And then later when he was 4 and a half, he was down in Florida with my family. And when he was 10 years old, your father wanted to see Washington, D.C. in winter. Obviously this is winter, not summer. And so my parents at that time were snowbirds around Tampa, Florida. And so we spent about a week in Washington, D.C. And when he was 10 years old, and then went down to Florida and flew back. But usually in the summer, obviously it was much, much warmer. So your father and I would travel. Your grandmother was too busy working. She didn't have time to travel. And so we went and we saw a lot of places. And so there's two things, as I mentioned to you. One is travel, and another is study, and then there's a third one, which is meeting people, and there's a fourth one, which is participating in a lot of things at school. Like I hope you're in your school and participating in a lot of stuff called extracurricular activities, because school is much more than just going to classes and learning stuff. So in my high school, I played basketball, and I also had a newspaper route. Now, your father went to Seoul International School, and your father was very popular. You might ask him about the phone calls he used to, well, maybe not. He used to get phone calls at night from girls when he was in high school, asking, can I speak to Shawn, please? Or, is Shawn there? And your father was a very popular student. I think he was probably the most popular student in his class for several years. And he played soccer. And then eventually, he also did weightlifting, as I remember. So when he applied to the University of Michigan, he had done a lot of stuff outside of just studying. And this is the important point. In high school, and particularly, you have to do other things besides just study. As I mentioned, I played basketball and had a newspaper route. And I had to juggle those. So, with your father, he and I used to travel around, and he saw a lot of places. And he didn't like camping that much. But I guess later he decided it wasn't too bad. But he got a chance to see a lot of the U.S. He had been in 28 states, as I said. And so then later when he went to university, he did a lot of other traveling. He had been in the Middle East. He had been in South America. And after he graduated with me, he was in Israel, again another trip. And your father, he was down in Mexico, and he traveled a lot. You might ask your father how many states he's been in. I don't know the number. I guess somewhere around 35, 40 states. And so travel is important too. And so basically, your father had a good life. And I hope you have a good life too. And you should go out and try a lot of different things. A lot of different things. So, you live in Texas now, and you might ask your father to take you around different parts of Texas. You're in Austin, Texas, and let me mention one place to you called Big Bend National Park. If you look at the map, you'll see it in West Texas. This is a very natural place. It's like a miniature, small Grand Canyon. Now, I haven't been there yet, but eventually I'd like to go there. I told you I spent most of my time in San Antonio, and I spent about 6 months in Wichita Falls. If you look northwest of Dallas, you'll see that. And so you might get a chance to look around Mexico. Not Mexico, around Texas. Texas is the largest state after Alaska. And Texas is divided into several different parts. And so if you're going to live in Texas and be a Texan, you should live and travel in different parts of Texas. That's all.